In 1921, the Malabar region of Kerala witnessed more than just a rebellion. It was a seismic shift in history. The Moplah Genocide, also known as Moplah Rebellion or Mappila Rebellion, wasn't merely about resistance against British rule. It was a thunderous roar against oppression amidst the backdrop of colonial domination and feudal control by Hindu elites. The Moplahs rose in defense. But this rebellion wasn't just about battles fought. It was a clash of culture and beliefs. Thousands of Hindus fell victim to the violence, facing not just death but also forced conversion to Islam. In the fiery crucible of revolution, the Malabar region was forever altered, leaving scars that echo through history, a reminder of the power of people when pushed to their limits and the price paid for freedom. Background: Kerala was invaded by Muslims from the west around the 7 AD. They had travelled by way of the Persian Sea to get there. The local authorities at that time assisted them by granting them approval to lead the trades and settle there. They were referred to as Moplah, literally son-in-law, and they married the girls of the local civilians. In Kerala, they used to cultivate the soil. The land was previously owned by the Janmis, who granted the land to other people for agriculture reasons. The affluent Hindus were known to as Janmis. The fields were primarily divided into 3 sections according to the cultivator. The cultivator was categorized along with the field. Additionally, the Moplahs served as farmers for Janmis in these fields. Numerous Hindus fled the country after Hyder Ali's invasion in order to avoid the oppression, and forced conversations took place as a result. The Moplah Muslims were given permission to possess the property parcels. British people took over the country after Tipu Sultan was killed. The Janmis received new ownership rights from the Brits. Unlike the earlier situation, they gained total power and control over the land. Moplah's Muslim tenants had to cope with rising rents and hardships. Following this time, there were a series of riots that resulted in the deaths of British citizens and landlords who were in positions of authority. The Moplah Muslims used the Khilafat non-cooperation movement as a chance to showcase the hardships they had experienced under oppression. Role of Indian leaders. The Indian leaders, especially M.K. Gandhi, thought that by extending support to the Khilafat movement, he would get Indian Muslims to fight against the British and participate in the non-cooperation movement. He thought that Indian Muslims would join the nationalist movement en masse if he supported their demand for an Islamic caliphate. What followed was mindless fanaticism by Moplah Muslims that resulted in the brutal murder of thousands of Hindus, the rape of thousands of Hindu women, and the destruction of temples that Hindus held sacred. Leader of the Moplah Rebellion. The 10 most notable leaders of the Moplah Rebellion are Variam Kunnat, Kunjahmed Haji, Ali Musliar, Pukwa Thangal, Embraseri Thangal, Patolla Kunjahmed, Konnara Muhammad, Kunji Ahmed Haji, Sithi Kwa Thangal, Unni Moidun Kwa, Kaliaseri Kunji Kwa Thangal. Brutality. Annie Besant, in her book The Future of Indian Politics, described the event as they murdered and plundered abundantly and killed and drove away all Hindus who would not apostatize. Somewhere about a lakh of people were driven from their homes with nothing but the clothes they had on, stripped of everything. Malabar has taught us what Islamic rule still means, and we do not want to see another specimen of the Khilafat Raj in India. Not only the Hindus were killed and forced to flee, but close to 100 temples were also destroyed by Islamists during the massacre. In a letter written to Lady Reading, wife of the then Indian Viceroy Lord Reading, by the Rani of Nilambar on behalf of the hundreds of Malabar Hindu women, that unravels just a sample of the ghastly genocides by the Moplah Muslims. The letter read as follows: We, the Hindu women of Malabar of varying ranks and stations in life, who have recently been overwhelmed by the tremendous catastrophe known as the Moplah Rebellion, take the liberty to supplicate your ladyship for sympathy and succor. Your ladyship is doubtless aware that though our unhappy district has witnessed many Moplah outbreaks in the course of the last 100 years, the present rebellion is unexampled in its magnitude as well as unprecedented in its ferocity. But it is possible that your ladyship is not fully apprised of all the horrors and atrocities perpetrated by the fiendless rebels, of the many wells and tanks filled up with the mutilated but often only half-dead bodies of our nearest and dearest ones who refused to abandon the faith of our fathers, of pregnant women cut to pieces and left on the roadsides in the jungles, with the unborn babes protruding from the mangled corpse of our innocent and helpless children torn from our arms and done to death before our eyes, and our husbands and fathers tortured, flayed and burnt alive, of our hapless sisters forcibly carried away from the midst of kith and kin, subjugated to every shame and outrage which the vile, brutal imagination of these inhuman hellhounds could conceive of thousands of our homesteads reduced to cinder mounds out of sheer savagery and a wanton spirit of destruction, of our places of worship desecrated and destroyed, and of the images of the deities shamefully insulted by putting the entrails of slaughtered cows where flower garlands used to lie, or else mashed to pieces, of the wholesale looting of hard-earned wealth of generations, reducing many who were formerly rich and prosperous to publicly beg for a piece or two in the streets of Calicut, to buy salt or chili or bitter leaf, rice being mercifully provided by the various relief agencies. These are not fables. The wells full of rotting skeletons, the rooms which were our dear homes, the heaps of stones which once were our places of worship, these are still here to attest to the truth. The cries of our murdered children in their death agonies are still ringing in our ears and will continue to haunt our memory till death brings us peace. We remember how, driven out of our native hamlets, we wandered starving and naked in the jungles and forests. We remember how we choked and stifled our babies' cries lest the sound should betray our hiding places to our relentless pursuers. We still vividly realize the moral and spiritual agony that thousands of us passed through when we are forcibly converted into the faith possessed by these bloodthirsty miscreants. We still have before us the sight of the endurable and lifelong misery of those unfortunate few of our most unhappy sisters who, brought up in respectable families, have been forcibly converted and then married to convict coolies. For 5 long months, not a day has passed without its dread tale of horror to unfold. Your gracious ladyship's distracted memorialists have endeavored without exaggeration, without setting down in malice, to convey at least some idea of the indescribably terrible agonies which they and thousands more of their sisters have been enduring for over 5 months now through this reign of inhuman fruitfulness, frightfulness, inaugurated and carries on in the name of the Khilafat. We have briefly referred, without going into their harrowing details, to our heartrending tale of dishonor, outrage, rapine, and dissolution. But if the past has been one of pain and anguish, the future is full of dread and gloom. We have to return to a ruined and desolated lands. Our houses have been burned and destroyed. Many of our breadwinners killed, all our property looted, our cattle slaughtered. Repatriation without compensation means for us ruin, beggary, starvation. Will not the benign government come to our aid and give us something to help us to begin life anew? We are now asked to settle down as paupers in the midst of the execrable fiends who robbed, insulted, and murdered our loved ones. Veritable demons such as hell itself could not lose. Many of us shrink from the idea of going back to what there is left of our homes. For though the armed band and rebels have been dispersed, the rebellion cannot be said to enter quelled. It is like a venomous serpent whose spine has been partly broken, but whose poison fangs are still intact, and whose striking power, if diminished, has not been destroyed. A few thousands of rebels have been killed and a few more thousands have been imprisoned. But as the government are only too well aware, many more thousands of rebels, looters, savagely militant evangelists, and other inhuman monsters yet remain at large. A few in concealment, but most moving about with arrogance, openly threatening reprisals on all non-Muslims who dare to return and resume possession of their property. Many refugees who went back have paid for their temerity with their lives. In fact, repatriation, if it is not to be a leap from the frying pan into the fire, must mean for the vast bulk of your ladyship's improvised and helpless memorialists and their families a hard, inexorable problems of financial help. and adequate protection against renewed hellish outrages from which immunity would be utterly impossible as long as thousands of men and even women, children of this semi-savage and fanatical race in whom the worst instincts of earth hunger, bloodlust and rapine have been awakened to fierce activity, are free to prey upon their preachable and inoffensive neighbors who, let it be most respectfully emphasized, because of their implicit trust in the power and the will of a just and benign government to protect them, has suffered their own art capacity for self-defense to emasculate and decay. We, your ladyship, humble and sorrow-stricken memorialists, do not seek vengeance. Our misery will not be rendered less by inflicting similar misery upon this barbarous and savage race. Our dead will not return to us if their slayers are slaughtered. We would not be human. However, if we could ever forget the cruel and shameful outrages and indignities perpetrated upon us by a race to whom we have always endeavored to be friendly and neighborly, we would be hypocritical if, robbed of all our possessions, we did not plead for some measures of compensation to help us out of the pauperism now forced upon us. We would be imbecile if, knowing the ungovernable antisocial propensities and the deadly religious fanatism of the Moplah race, we did not entreat the just and powerful government to protect the lives and honor of our humble sisters who have to live in the rebel-ravaged zone. Our ambition, after all, is low enough. Sufficient compensation to save us and our children from starvation and enough military protection against massacre and outrage are all that we want. We beseech your compassionate ladyship to exercise all the benevolent influence that you possess with the government to see that our humble prayers are granted. But if the benign government does not consider it possible to compensate us and to protect us in our native land, we would most fervently pray that free grants of land may be assigned to us in some neighboring region, which, though less blessed with the lavish gifts of nature, may also be less cursed by the cruelty and brutality of man. Causalities. According to official records, the colonial government lost 43 troops with 126 wounded, while 2,337 rebels were killed, another 1,652 injured, and 45,404 imprisoned. Unofficial estimated put the number of civilian deaths to 10,000, 50,000 imprisoned, of who 20,000 were deported mainly to the penal colony in the Andaman Islands, while around 1,000 went missing. The number of civilian casualties is estimated at between 10,000 to 12,000. Lord Curzon's statement given in the British Parliament was that the Moplah Rebellion is just over, but at least 2,500 Moplahs have been killed by our troops, at least 1,000 Hindus were murdered, at least 1,000 more were forcibly converted to Islam, temples and churches were defiled and damaged, property to the value of £250,000 was destroyed. Conclusion. The Malabar Rebellion of 1921, or the Moplah Genocide, was a profound upheaval marked by violent resistance against British colonial rule and feudal Hindu elites in Kerala. Driven by systematic oppression, the Moplah Muslim revolt led to horrific atrocities, including mass killings, rapes, forced conversions, and the destruction of Hindu temples, churches. The rebellion's brutal aftermath left deep scars, transforming the socio-political landscape of the region. This tragic episode underscores the devastating consequence of religious and social strife, reflecting the immense human cost of the struggle for freedom and justice. This genocide also reflects on the danger of Islamic radicalization, which not only creates a separate nation for the Muslims, like Pakistan later, but it still haunts the people of the subcontinent irrespective of the religion. Thanks for watching. Jai Hind.